everyone, and welcome to Southridge. If this is your first time joining us in this format, an extra special welcome to you. We also want to offer a few tips on how to make the most of this experience. Be sure to crank up the volume during the music and sing along. Don't worry, we can't hear you. Musicians, download the music charts below the video, grab your instrument, and play along. For any kids participating with us, don't worry if you don't know or can't read the words. Just sing, dance, or make music of your own. We're so happy when you join in with us. If English isn't your first language or you experience hearing challenges, we encourage you to turn on the closed captioning on this video or download the transcripts for this morning's message. And be sure to download the Southridge app. This is the best way to stay connected and informed about everything that's going on here at Southridge. It's completely free and super easy to use. For the next hour, I invite you to engage with this experience, just as if you were with us in person. You're surrounded by a community of diverse, curious, open-minded, and inclusive people, all desiring to tap into the power and presence of God together as we worship, pray, listen, laugh, and grow. There might be some things we do or say today that really resonate with you, and that's great. There might also be things that stretch and challenge you, and we think that's good too. Ultimately, we encourage you to engage openly, thoughtfully, honestly, and wholeheartedly, trusting that the God we're here to connect with is a God who above all else is love. So as we begin our time together, wherever and whenever you are, whether this is your first time with us or you've been around forever, we hope that for the next hour you feel like you're among friends. Welcome to Southridge. We're so glad you're here.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never failed me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You've led me through the fire and darkest night. You were close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. Every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I'll give you everything. Your goodness is is holy ground, where you are pleased to be. Starting to see it now, and I hear the Father say, you're my beloved one, nothing can prize away. Covenant built on love. When I feel like ruins, you see foundation. You see foundations to build your kingdom here. I'll stop second guessing you, even when failures come. Redemption is what you do. You're the God who makes weak things strong. When I feel like ruins, you see foundations. Well, you see foundations to build your kingdom here. When I feel like ruins, you see foundations. You see foundations to build your kingdom here. And my brokenness made beautiful. It's like you said, all things made new. My heart cries out, build your kingdom here. Let faith like fire burn in our bones. Let hope arise from weary souls. Our hearts cry out, build your kingdom here. When I feel like ruins, you see foundations. You see foundations to build your kingdom here. When I feel like ruins, you see foundations. Yes, you see foundations to build your kingdom here. And my brokenness made beautiful. It's like you said, all things made new. My heart cries out, build your kingdom here. Let faith like fire burn in our bones. Let hope arise from weary souls. Our hearts cry out, build your kingdom here. 'Cause when I feel like ruins, you see foundations. You see foundations to build your kingdom here. When I feel like ruins, you see foundations. You see foundations to build your kingdom here.
We're glad you're here.
That sounded really weird.
You need to take a good look too, because you ain't never gonna see another one like me.
We invite you. Nope.
You forgot the whole line that you made.
The whole line.
We are a diverse community of imperfect people.
who see the church as less of something to go to and more of a life to be lived and shared with others.
We are continually growing in what it means to love one another, fighting for unity rather than fighting over unnecessary arguments.
We are living to serve this world in the way of Jesus, serving those in need and those on the margins, knowing that friendship truly makes the difference.
So if you're coming with questions or curiosities,
hurts or frustrations,
joys or celebrations,
wondering if the church can bring clarity or hope,
or simply be a place to belong,
we invite you to be at home with us.
We invite you to explore with us.
We invite you to grow with us.
And we invite you to belong with us.
welcome to Southridge. We're glad you're here.
Hey there. My name is Andrea Jago Lynette, and I serve as the Welland First Impressions lead here at Southridge. We're so glad you're participating with us, and we hope this has already been a meaningful time for you. So I'm here in our St. Catharines location, and if you've never joined us for one of our in-person gatherings at one of our physical Southridge locations, we would love to have you consider joining us in person when you feel ready and able. Well, we're so grateful to have this online platform to share in this experience from wherever and whenever we find ourselves. We love it even more when we can gather together as a community. In fact, if you do come out, please come say hi to me or one of our many welcoming volunteers, and we'd love to get a small gift into your hands, just as a way of showing our appreciation for taking the time to come meet us in person. And as even more of an incentive, we actually have monthly welcome lunches for anyone who's looking to learn more about our community and wanting to connect with some folks over some delicious food. Just check out our events page on our website to see when an upcoming welcome lunch is happening. We'd love to meet you there. If, for whatever reason, you're not able to or not comfortable with joining us in person, please know that actually doesn't in any way exclude you from participating in community with us. If you need to touch base with a pastor for any reason, please simply fill out one of our Connect cards. We can't wait to hear from you. For those of us who call this community home, one of the ways we practice togetherness and express our gratitude to God and generosity to others is by regular financial contributions. This is one of the ways we can invest our lives in what God is doing in and through our church family, making a difference by meeting needs among us across our region and around the world. All of our online giving options are available on our website, and so if you're able to give this week, we invite you to do so in a spirit of joy and generosity, and we thank you in advance for your faithfulness. Now, to help you stay aware of more opportunities to engage with our community or to get involved, check this out.
The new year marks the time when we engage in what we call church membership affirmation at Southridge. Now, some of us may be more familiar with the concept of church membership than others. Maybe you've been a member of a local church before, or maybe this is your first time hearing the idea of church membership. Well, at Southridge, we participate in this practice of becoming or affirming local church membership as a way to practically express spiritual values of belonging and contributing. In Ephesians 2, the Apostle Paul writes that when we put our faith in Jesus, we become members of God's household. In Romans 12, he writes that in Christ, we are one body with many members. This is the kind of belonging and contributing we seek to foster through the practice of church membership affirmation. If it helps, you may think of formal church membership kind of like moving from playing, a pickup basketball game to officially signing up to be part of a team. Well, the values of belonging and contributing are similar. The mutual commitment of a team, it can help you experience it more fully. Now, church membership at Southridge, it also comes with practical responsibilities and privileges. Members have the responsibility and the ultimate authority in our community to vote on the renewing terms for our Board of Elders and to approve our annual operating budget, which we'll do together at our annual general meeting on Sunday, February 25th. At the same time, members have the privilege of being most connected to communication, updates, and conversations related to the leadership and direction of our church. So with all that in mind, if membership at Southridge interests you in 2024, in order to more fully live out these values of belonging and contributing in our community, then I invite you to go to southridgechurch.ca/membership to reflect on our membership commitments. And if you'd like to affirm those commitments with us, we invite you to officially affirm your Southridge membership for 2024. If you want to chat about church membership at all, we invite you to reach out to any of us, any of our leaders or pastors or elders. And more than anything, what we want to do is invite all of us to fully embrace the belonging and contributing that God has made available through Jesus as we seek to be his hands and feet together in the year ahead.
One of the most exciting moments in the life of our community is when we get to see and hear from people who have made the decision to put their trust in Jesus and follow him along with us. We celebrate these stories, decisions, and experiences through the ceremony of baptism. Baptism is an outward expression of an inward reality where we enter the water to symbolize the washing of an old life and come out of the water to symbolize the rising to a new life because of what Jesus has done for us. And you've joined us on a special week as we get to celebrate that today. So we invite you to check out these stories of folks who have made the decision to get baptized in our community. And if you're curious as to whether baptism might be the next step in your journey, please go to southridgechurch.ca/baptism to start the process with us.
I've always been in a community and surrounded by family who believed and went to church every Sunday. About the start of high school in grade 9, I really started to journey a little deeper into myself and find my faith. It really started when I dealt with more issues that I faced, and anxiety is a huge issue of mine, so I kind of deal with it every day, and just having God and Jesus there to talk to all the time and help me go over issues that I might face throughout my day-to-day life is kind of how I started to get closer with my faith, yeah. So baptism is kind of my way of getting rid of my past self and starting my journey and showing that I'm serious about it and I want to learn more and really start following Jesus and making it a priority, I guess. I was raised in a family where everyone believed, but when I got to high school there was a lot more different religions and non-believers and stuff like that, so it faced me with a challenge of discovering that it wasn't all Christians out there and there was different beliefs and stuff. So when I came across people disagreeing with me or thinking what I thought was weird, it was a struggle I faced to really step into my beliefs and certify it for myself. But yeah, so post-baptism, I'd like to be more, available to myself for people who might need it, and be open to helping other people express their love for God and their experience, and be able to, help by sharing my story, and just be available to people who might need extra help and stuff like that.
I grew up in a Christian home. Both of my parents were Christian, always going to church every Sunday, and just going to Bible school, learning about God, and the experiences like camp and Change Conference with youth, and just hearing more and more stories about Jesus. I definitely felt that pull from the Holy Spirit to learn more about Jesus and to really develop that relationship with just me and God. In 2022, at Camp Crossroads Youth Week, the last chapel was huge. I remember just looking around and seeing the tears of joy, and it's the Holy Spirit overfilling people and people that I love, and that was just really cool, and I knew that from then on I definitely needed to get baptized. Constantly been reading the Bible more and more and praying about it, and talking to people, either my youth leaders or two of my youth leaders, Andrew and Jed, have been a huge part in my faith journey. Just learning about what baptism means and kind of learning about how baptism is not the finish line, but it's just the beginning. Yeah, just going forward, just really diving into living a life through Jesus. And yeah, I think that just spreading the gospel to people of all nations and just setting an example for people on how to live a life like Christ.
That's it from me. Now we're going to hear this week's talk together. As we do, I invite you to remove as many distractions as possible and listen in to what God might want to be saying uniquely to you.
Well, last Sunday, we kicked off the year with what I think was a pretty compelling presentation from author and global entrepreneur Liz Bohannon, which is really kind of setting the tone for our entire January series. And Liz shared with us that we, especially in North America, are living through what she would describe as an epidemic of loneliness. You know, that the majority of people, you know, even those who maybe appear most successful or seem to have the most connections, or especially people in positions of responsibility or leadership, that they actually report feeling lonely most of the time. And it's kind of a heavy reality to process, but one that I suspect probably too many of us felt ourselves relating to as well. But Liz also shared with us the good news that it doesn't have to be this way. That while loneliness is currently at like epidemic levels, loneliness is not inevitable. That there is another way to live, another way that we're designed to live, as we are actually created and made for community and connection and interdependent relationships. And Liz shared with us how we can see this most clearly portrayed in Jesus. And that's where we want to spend our attention throughout the rest of this series, looking at Jesus and how we can learn from him and follow him in order to live life not alone. That's kind of what this series is all about. Now, one of the features that Liz shared about what it often takes to sort of sidestep the loneliness of our age is that she said that it usually requires us to go first. You know, that authentic community or in-depth friendships, they don't usually happen by accident. They don't just fall into our laps, but that there are steps we can take in our lives in order to create and cultivate and to nurture these kinds of relationships. And so today, what I want to do is consider what we can learn from Jesus, particularly about going first in community. Now, although it doesn't actually come first in our Bibles, the first gospel account of the life of Jesus that was ever written is the gospel according to Mark. And one of the things I enjoy about the book of Mark is that it sort of comes at us at an action-packed pace. At 16 chapters, it's actually the shortest of the gospel accounts of the life of Jesus. And out of this, apparent eagerness to rapidly capture and articulate the good news of Jesus, the writer Mark, throughout the entire gospel, he just kind of keeps going and diving into the action chapter after chapter. But one of the reasons that commentators believe Mark doesn't seem to want to waste any time as he sort of plows through the highlights of the life of Jesus is because Mark was writing to the non-Jewish audience of the Roman world. A world that was thoroughly accustomed to a fast-paced, kind of consumer-driven, entertainment-oriented, kind of action-packed way of life. Something that is extremely foreign to us in the 21st century, right? No, these were the people who Mark was writing to, a people and a culture kind of living and moving at a pace that certainly had them at risk of missing out on Jesus, and probably also at risk at missing out on Jesus-like community. And so even as Mark in his gospel, again, he gets kind of right into the action. What I want to do today is look at what some of that earliest action of the Gospel of Mark entails. As we'll look at a few episodes in these first few chapters of Mark, and to see sort of the significance and the primacy for Jesus of going first in order to experience community in our lives, in order to live life not alone. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app you have access to this morning, if you want to follow along a little more directly, you could turn to Mark chapter 1. Well, the first thing I want to look at is kind of the first action in the story right after Jesus comes on the scene, declaring that the time has come for the good news of the kingdom of God to be proclaimed. And look at what happens next. It says, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Then it says, come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. Now, as Mark kicks off the action of Jesus coming on the scene, Jesus, who he already declared in the very first verse, was this long anticipated Messiah, the anointed one that was coming to make all things right in the world. The first action that Mark records is of Jesus finding some friends that he can invite to go on the journey with him. You know, as the Savior of the world, you know, the one who we'd assume could be capable of handling life on his own, Jesus actually starts his saving work by inviting a couple of friends, not just to join him on the journey, but frankly, to fully share in what God was up to in his life. And we see this kind of come to further fruition just a couple chapters later when Jesus chose and invited what became known as his group of 12 disciples. This is now in Mark 3, verse 13. It says, as Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. It says he appointed 12 that they might be with him. I love a couple of the phrases here where it says, you know, Jesus called those he wanted. What we see here clearly in Jesus is a want for community. And out of that want, a going first to invite that community into his life. But more than just a want, I believe what we see here is that through the humanity of Jesus, Jesus shares in the need that we all have for community when it says that they might be with him. You know, that Jesus would have people to share life with. That Jesus would have people to count on, have people to laugh with, have people to cry with. That Jesus would have people when the action of his life would get most intense or even feel like too much to carry on his own. Friends, when it comes to going first, in order to live and experience life not alone, the first thing we see in Jesus is that Jesus goes first in embracing companions. That Jesus goes first in inviting companions into his life. That's like the first thing we see in the action of the Gospel of Mark. So on this first point, what about you? Would you say you have real companions in your life? And at the start of this year, might there be a small step you could take to actually embrace a deeper experience of companionship, to go first in inviting companions into your life and your journey? You know, what friend could you invite for coffee to share about some of your hopes for the year ahead or the kind of relationship you'd like to deepen with them? You know, what family or friends could you invite over for dinner or make a habit of sharing meals together? You know, rather than falling into the trap that we often fall into of just commiserating that, you know, we never get an invitation. Or if you don't know where to start, what about trying one of our life groups? Going first to take the risk to sign up for a group and explore the kind of community that can be nurtured when we make regular space to share our lives with others. Or if you're already in a life group, getting to experience the gift of that kind of community. What if you were to go first in encouraging your life group to consider, are there any other companions we could invite into the mix? This is the first thing we see from Jesus when it comes to going first, that Jesus goes first in embracing companions. Now, the second thing we see here in the early parts of the action of Mark's gospel is that not only does Jesus go first in embracing companions, but he goes first in initiating conversations, particularly in initiating conversations of significance. You know, if you were to read Mark's entire gospel for yourself, you'd see the countless times Jesus is the one kind of initiating meaningful conversations with anyone he's with. But we can already get a glimpse of this in an episode right in Mark chapter 2, in a situation where Jesus was responding after he forgave the sins of a paralyzed man. We're picking this up in Mark 2, verse 5, where it starts here by saying, well, Jesus saying to the paralyzed man, he says, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Then it says, now some teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Then it says, immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this is what they were thinking in their hearts. And so he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things?" You see, this paralyzed man, he was brought to Jesus in hopes that he would be healed of his paralysis, which eventually was. Jesus healed him. But the first thing Jesus does is declare that the man's sins are forgiven. It's a bold declaration, and it immediately changes the temperature in the room. You know, as it says, these religious experts, they began to scowl, or other translations say they were murmuring under their breath, questioning whether Jesus had the right to say that. And what I want us to notice here is what Jesus does in response, in the room with everyone present. That he actually asks them, he responds by asking them a direct and incisive question in a desire to bring the entire kind of conversation to the heart of the matter. When Jesus says to them, "Why are you thinking these things?" Now this whole episode and experience, it may seem like a sort of a Jesus-only instinct, a Jesus-only reaction, a Jesus-only possibility. But I want you to consider, have you ever had an experience where you've been in a situation or among a group of friends where you sensed that there was something deeper that could be addressed? Maybe something deeper below the surface of the conversation. Maybe that someone was holding back in some way, that there was like a question behind the question or a comment behind the comment, or maybe that someone didn't seem to be doing as fine, as they said they were doing. And in those situations, what do you do? Because I think what we can start to see in Jesus in this brief episode, and then, countless times throughout the gospel, is that Jesus wasn't afraid to sort of get to the heart of the conversation. Jesus wasn't afraid to ask a tough question that could help deepen the conversation. That when it comes to truly living not alone at the deepest levels, what we see here is that Jesus goes first in initiating conversations, especially conversations of significance. So in your relationships, in your conversations, how is that going? How would you gauge the level of depth of the conversations you normally have in your relationships? And whether it's at your workplace or with your class, a group of friends, on a group chat, how could you be someone who goes first and helping to inspire the conversation, to go beyond sports, weather, or just current events? With your friends or your life group where you wished the conversation would get, beneath the surface more often, how could you go first in kind of opening up more vulnerably? The conversations around the dinner table that kind of consistently tend to drift towards criticism or gossip about others, how can you go first in helping redirect the conversation toward love? In the pains or difficulties in our relationships, or maybe you've caused hurt or you've experienced hurt from someone else, how can you go first in confession or sometimes in confrontation in order to get to the heart of the issue? That's the kind of going first we see in Jesus, that Jesus goes first to initiate meaningful conversations. Now, finally for today, the third thing I want us to see here in this early action of the Gospel of Mark is that in addition to going first to embrace companions and going first to initiate conversations. What we see in Jesus is that Jesus kind of goes first and leads the way in resisting the false or short-term sense of connection that comes through a crowd. We see this right away in chapter 1. This is following the first miracles and healings recorded by Mark. Kind of in the aftermath the next day, we pick it up here in verse 35 where it says, very early this next morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Then it says Simon and Jesus' companions went to look for Jesus. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Basically, what they're saying with enthusiasm is, Jesus, because of what you've done yesterday and your miracles and your healings, like everyone's looking for you. Everyone wants to be around you. We have a following. We've made it. And look at what Jesus says in response. It says, Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else." Let us go somewhere else. What I want us to notice here is that in a moment when most of us, like the disciples, would be inclined to think like, this is our moment. You know, we've made it. Look at the following we've established. We can kind of find our place in the crowd. We can find our belonging in the crowd and kind of have this sense of we're never going to be alone again. In that kind of situation, Jesus actually resisted kind of the false or temporary connection that crowds tend to provide. And instead, he wanted to keep moving on his journey, keep moving in his primary purpose along with his close companions. We see a very similar sentiment, again, just a couple chapters later. Before Jesus appoints his 12 disciples in the passage I read earlier, I'll read this actually from the Message translation where Mark 3:7, it says, Jesus went off with his disciples to the sea to get away, though a huge crowd from Galilee trailed after them. You know, what we see consistently throughout the life and work of Jesus is that, well, Jesus certainly didn't ignore the crowds, you know, often making space to speak to them and teach them, to heal and provide for them, to attend to their needs. Jesus also didn't entrust his primary sort of sense of identity and belonging to the crowd. Instead, Jesus often sought to get away with his friends where he could continue to tap into and nurture the kind of deeper and authentic and interdependent community that can really only be experienced in intimate, up close, and personal friendships. I think so that he wouldn't one day find himself all alone. What we see here is that Jesus goes first in not settling for a crowd. And friends, I think this one actually has huge implications for us in our day, and especially when you consider the factors contributing to sort of the epidemic of loneliness that so many of us experience. Because we actually live in a day where we have more opportunities to feel connected and networked than ever before in human history. And because of our mobility and our technology, lots of us kind of feel like we have lots of acquaintances, maybe a number of social circles. You know, we have lots of friends or followers on social media. And yet, how often do we still feel lonely in the midst of it all? You know, as though our lives can be surrounded by people, and yet somehow we're still all alone. And if you can relate to that feeling, I think one of the things here we can learn from Jesus is that we need to be aware of that, and we need to be mindful and deliberate about not settling for a crowd, not letting our connections to crowds replace our need for deeper companionship. And this requires us living counterculturally, again, to follow Jesus and investing in deeper levels of connection, to go beyond the crowd, ensuring we have some consistent, close companions who we connect with regularly, you know, to actually sometimes step away from the crowds, to have enough margin in our life, to more spontaneously respond to our friends' needs, you know, to spend less time present to the crowds on our screens and more time present to the few people that might be right in front of us. and to appreciate that, like Jesus, there may be some events or some circles or some activities or programs or some crowds that we sometimes actually just have to say no to in order to actually say yes to truly living not alone. Friends, I think these are some of the things we can take away, particularly from this early action of the Gospel of Mark, the action where Jesus went first in creating community, in wanting to be a person and part of a community where they didn't live life alone. And we see how Jesus went first in embracing companions, and went first in initiating meaningful conversations, and went first in not settling for just a crowd. Now, I know the idea of going first can feel scary. And frankly, we all have different personalities and different past experiences in our relationships. That means we all have different kinds of obstacles and opportunities in front of us when it comes to whatever going first might look like in our life. And it can take a variety of forms. For me, and as I've been reflecting on this, I've been reminded of how I have so many ways I need to keep growing and actually making rearrangements in my life if I'm not gonna miss out on more of this Jesus-like community, and frankly, live life less lonely in my own life in the year ahead. But at the same time, as I've reflected, excuse me, on what it means to go first, I've thought about some of those experiences in my life where I've seen the risk of going first really paying off. And as one example, I was especially reflecting on this over the holiday season, as I was remembering about when our family first moved into our current neighborhood 12 years ago. As is usually the case, when you move somewhere new, we didn't know anybody on the street. And as you do, you start sort of observing the different people and personalities. You know, we saw on our street, there was a variety of ages and stages of life represented. And different personalities, some people that were eager to kind of come and talk to you or introduce themselves, others that seemed content to drive by, maybe even without a wave. But we did kind of move in wanting to have some deliberacy to try to get to know our neighbors or maybe cultivate a little bit of community among our neighbors. And so within our first year, when the Christmas season came around, we had this idea of what if we threw what we thought might be the first ever Keystone Drive Christmas party. Thinking, what if we were actually to extend invitations to the entire street? And we decided to do that. We dropped an invite in every mailbox on the street, inviting every neighbor on our street to a Christmas party kind of open house. And, you know, as we had once we had the courage of the idea and, you know, put out the invites, you know, there was some adrenaline. It was kind of fun and exciting. But once the invites were out there, the terrifying thoughts and feelings set in. As we were struck with thinking, like, what on earth are we doing? You know, is anyone even going to be interested? Is anyone going to want to come? Are people thinking we're kind of crazy for trying to host this kind of party, or that we're too presumptuous in going first, maybe as the newbies on the street? You know, what if there are some backstories to some of these neighbors that we don't know about? What if some of them don't like each other? They show up at the same time and the whole thing's like a gong show or a blow up. These were some of the scary thoughts that came into our minds. Well, that was 12 years ago. And now, having just got to celebrate our 10th annual Keystone Christmas party, having missed a couple for COVID, and I've got a photo here. This photo is from a couple years ago, as I didn't take any more recently. But as we celebrated again this year, inviting all of our neighbors over for a Christmas party, it made me think how Lindsay and I couldn't imagine what it would be like to not get to do life in some of the pretty close connection and community that we enjoy with quite a few of our neighbors, some of whom we kind of enjoy and experience just like family. You know, there are people who lend us tools or we share baking supplies with when we're low. There's a number of people who help me with the many mechanical things around the house that I am thoroughly incompetent for. You know, people who have shared with us about some of their anxieties, or when they've gone through health challenges or lost a loved one, we've been able to help care for or even sometimes offer prayer for. You know, people who invited me to officiate their daughter's wedding. People who drop off food, sometimes just because, people who look after each other's kids, people who call and text occasionally just to check in on how each other are doing. People who we've come to enjoy serving dinners with regularly at our homeless shelter in our St. Catharines location, getting to be part of a beautiful purpose in the world together. These have been just some of the payoffs that we've got to experience out of that first risk of going first. Now, going first certainly doesn't have to look like throwing a street-wide party, and frankly, most of the time, it won't. Like I said, I've been thinking about all kinds of small but significant ways I would need to keep tweaking my life to really grow in experiencing this not alone, Jesus-like kind of community. But that's kind of my question for us this morning. What's one small step we could all take this month to live life less alone? What friend can you invite out for a conversation of significance? What night of your week, or maybe just even once a month you could start with, that you could carve out to invite someone over to dinner to build community and relationship? Maybe it's to sign up for a life group, or sign up for our Start the Party social event at the end of the month, or maybe to invite someone new into your life group. Or maybe your go first next step is simply to come back and join us again next week, to keep getting to know a few more people in this community, and to keep exploring Jesus in the context of this community. And friends, wherever we find ourselves in this conversation, or wherever you find yourself in this experience of an epidemic of loneliness, as I wrap up, the thing that I most want us to hear this morning is the real good news is that Jesus went first for you. That Jesus went first in all of these ways to show us the way, to show us that they're possible, and to empower us to follow him. And then Jesus went first in the greatest way, who we see and put our trust in as the representation of God, who came to go first in giving up his life for the sake of the world, to show us the full extent of God's love. And then who rose again to give us his Spirit, all as part of an unending promise to never leave us or forsake us so that we would never have to live life alone. That's who Jesus is, and that's what Jesus has done, and that is how Jesus has gone first for you. So can we follow him a little bit more together? And when it comes to our relationships and community, can we go first in embracing some companions? Can we go first in initiating meaningful conversations? And can we go first in not settling for just being a crowd together? That's my hope, and that's my prayer for us in this series. And as we end our message today, we have the privilege and the gift of getting to hear a couple of stories of two young people in our community who today are going first in their relationship with Jesus through the celebration of baptism. So may we be inspired by Grace's story and Isaac's story of going first in what it means to put trust and faith in Jesus through the baptism stories. Check these out.
I was buried beneath my shame. Well, who could carry the kind of weight? It was my tomb until I met you. Well, I was breathing, but now alive, and all my failures I tried to hide. Well, it was my tomb till I met you, and you called my name, and I ran out of that grave. my soul. And now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you, and you called my name, and I ran out of that grave. My sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my
We're a community of imperfect people
who desire to put into practice the good news that we preach.
Our faith is not about an hour of watching or attending.
It's about a lifestyle of full devotion to Christ.
Not just as something to believe, but someone to follow.
We don't want to talk a good game on Sunday, only to remain unaffected or ineffective the rest of the week.
So while we gather each week to sing, pray, listen, and learn,
we know that an hour a week will never produce the life change that we so desperately need.
It requires a daily investment of time and training. It takes practice.
And practice.
And more practice.
And when we mess up, we forgive ourselves and each other.
Then help each other get up and keep practicing.
As we go now into the rest of our week,
may we not just be hearers of the word, but doers also.
May the Spirit of God fill us and make us kind and compassionate,
honest and humble,
generous and hospitable,
those who repay evil with good,
respond to injustice with action, overcoming despair with hope.
Let us be known not by what we're against, but by what and who we are for.
And most of all, let us love one another, because God is love.
It's been good to be together, but now it's time for us to go.
In the name of the Father, who loves us unconditionally.
In the name of the Son, who restores our true humanity.
And in the name of the Spirit, who empowers us to live life to the full.
Amen.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you felt inspired and challenged by our time together. Now, we know that for what we've heard today to become reality in our daily lives, it's going to take more than this 1 hour a week that we spend together. It requires a daily, moment-by-moment, everyday commitment to practicing the way of peace and the way of Jesus. That's why we provide a host of ways to continue to lean into God's presence while we're away from each other. As always, you can click the Practice This Week button below the player for daily spiritual exercises to continue to develop the muscles we've started building today. If it helps, you can also opt into the Spiritual Practices notifications on our app to get those helpful reminders every morning as you start your day. As our time together ends, we're going to put some questions on the screen. If you're watching with others, they can serve as great conversation starters and can be adapted to have conversations with people of all ages. but they can also be a great way of processing and personalizing what you've heard today on your own. If you'd like a more personal conversation with someone about anything that's going on in your life, please reach out to our location pastors who will follow up with you privately. You could also fill out a Connect card, which you can find on our website or app. That's all for now. Thanks for joining us and have a great week. Bye.